Go, Marissa. All right. Welcome back to Talon Talk with your host, Aiden Coleman. Today I'm joined by Tyrone alumni and Penn State alumni, Mr. Tom Templeton. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
Oh, I am doing wonderful. So, backtrack to our previous episode. We were talking about your high school career and all about that. Is there anything you want to add? Some players you want to shout out? Anything like that?
I would. I forgot to mention Chuck Hikus, who was an intricate part of our team. Chuck had run punts back. I think he was ready to set a record of 7 or 8 or something like that. I can't remember. Unfortunately, he was running one back, and I was called for clipping on the other side of the field. I wasn't even close. But this guy stopped in front of me, and I ran into him. The ref throws a flag. Chuck doesn't get his record. So, Chuck, I'm very sorry. But he's had a great coaching career. So much for that. And then we had guys like Tony Singer. Sorry to put my glasses on. Bill Gearhart was the quarterback my junior year. He was a phenomenal athlete, played basketball. Max Snellbaugh, whose father was on the team in the 40s that played for the state championship, as was my dad. And Don Friday set extra point record of 7 in a game. Amazingly enough, his son, years later, Luke, kicked 7 in a row. And somebody's had 8 now, but
Yeah.
And so it's great history there. That's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. I do have a picture here of Don Friday, Coach Schoenwolf, which is Mrs. Chamberlain's father, and myself coaching back in probably 1990, something like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you that. So other than that, I just wanted to mention a couple of those guys. And I'm sorry if I missed a couple guys, but there are too many to mention.
I'm sure they'll understand.
Yeah. No, they won't.
So it says here, you graduated from Tyrone in 1966. You were awarded a scholarship to Penn State football and was also on Joe Paterno's first varsity team in 1966. Can you tell us a little bit about all that?
Yes, I was actually recruited by Rip Engel. Rip Engel was predecessor to Joe, and Penn State was having growing pains back in those days.
Yeah.
And Joe comes in, and I got to tell you a great story about Joe and how he got to town. And I never heard this till a couple of years ago, but there was a guy named Mr. Boyle who was the golf coach. And his son is now the golf pro at Center Hills Country Club. So Joe comes to Rec Hall where he knew all the coaches were.
Yeah.
And at that time, he's coming into Rec Hall, and Mr. Boyle's coming out of Rec Hall. So Joe approaches him and says, "Hi," he says, "I'm Joe Paterno. I'm the new football coach." Mr. Boyle introduced himself, and Joe says, "I need some help." He said, "I'm here in town. I have no money." And he said, "I've got to rent an apartment." So he didn't know Sue at the time, I don't think. So Mr. Boyle takes him down to the bank, and they borrow $1,000. So every month they had to go to the bank and sign and make the payment. This is back in ancient days. So every month Joe would call Mr. Boyle. Well, one month Joe doesn't call. So Mr. Boyle calls him, and Joe says, "Oh," he said, "I got paid. I paid it off." So that's how Joe got to town.
Yeah.
And Jeb is very happy to tell that story. So
I'm sure.
Jeb Boyle. I was actually, my freshman coach was this guy, Earl Bruce. He was terrible.
Hopefully he's not listening to this.
No, he's gone. He's up in heaven coaching football, I think. So that picture was in the Herald and the Altoona Mirror because I had been injured again. So I was plagued with many injuries and only ever played in one game. But the history of those times and what's happened since is what it's all about. So.
Oh, definitely.
we also had at that time Dan Radakovich, who was our linebacker coach, who eventually went to the Steelers, and J.T. White, who was a two-time All-American. He was an All-American before he went to World War II. He was an All-American when he came back at Michigan, I think, or Michigan State. So we had some pretty amazing guys.
Oh, it definitely sounds like it.
Oh.
So expanding on how you were saying about injuries, you were never able to really play much. However, you did get to play with big-name players like Jack Ham, Franco Harris, Lydell Mitchell, Mike Reed, and many others. Can you tell us some of their information about those people, like how you got to know them and stories about them?
Well, Franco, I don't know well, but we run into each other every so often. He does a lot of work for Doug Rosso's, and he has a gal here in town that works for him.
Yeah.
I won't say her name. She might not like that. So I don't know Franco well. I do have a picture of him and me, which is kind of neat. Jack Ham and I were good friends. We played golf together for many years, and then when I became, I had eye trouble. I couldn't play much anymore.
Yeah.
I'd look down at the ball and I'd say I see three balls, and I honestly did. Jack would say, hit the middle one. What's your problem?
Hit the middle one.
Jack and our friends have been friends a long time.
Yeah.
And now he does the play-by-play at Penn State games, which is kind of neat. Lydell, I don't know Lydell well, but he was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
He was so fast in those days.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yep. And who else did you mention?
Mike Reed.
Oh, Mike. Oh, I got to tell you a story. Mike Reed was from Altoona. He is from Altoona. Now lives in Nashville. He writes songs. He wrote songs for Ronnie Millsap and some others. And first day I came on campus at Penn State, I was highly recruited by many schools, and I think Joe might have thought I was cocky, although I wasn't. I really wasn't. I was scared to death. So first day in practice, he puts me up against my friend Mike. And I look at Mike, I'm thinking, he's, we'll just go at it.
Yeah.
He knocked me over my butt. I had never been hit like that in my life.
Yeah.
Mike weighs 260. I weighed about probably 190, 200.
Oh, jeez.
And the mistake he made was reaching down to help me up.
Oh.
And when he did, we hear, "What are you doing, Mike? You don't do that." So we had to run him out after practice.
Oh, my gosh.
So I see Mike once in a while, and we had our 50th reunion a couple of years ago at the baseball stadium, Bendler Field.
Yeah.
And went to the game first, then we had this reunion. And Mike came and had written a song about Joe Paterno, and it was very heart-wrenching. Mike, he just has a way of putting words together in songs.
Yeah.
And I think everybody there was crying because Joe had passed by that time.
Yeah.
So that's my Mike Reed story.
That's awesome. So, well, it says here when Joe was recruiting you, you guys went to Penn State for a weekend. Your mother and dad stayed at the Nittany Lion Inn, and you in a dorm. Sue Paterno, Joe's wife, found out it was your parents' 20th anniversary, so she threw a party for them that Saturday night. You were also to fly to UCLA 2 weeks later for a recruiting trip, but your dad stopped that after the party. So, can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, it took me 20 years to get to California after that. Back in those days, I was only 16.
Wow.
I think I was 16 at the time. I didn't turn 17 until I went on campus. But my dad had to sign for me to make any airplane trip.
Yeah.
He wouldn't sign. So he also wouldn't sign for me to go to Notre Dame. So
yeah.
I'll tell you that story later.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so they stayed in the Nittany Lion Inn. My dad had never seen a remote control TV. I mean, we grew up on a farm in Vail.
Yeah.
And Mom said he was up all night watching TV, whatever he could. They only had 3 channels back then. Now we have, 800?
Oh, God, too many. So many unnecessary.
So, I stayed in the dorm with some guys, and with Dave Bradley, who eventually died of a brain tumor. He was from Chief Logan. So you can see Penn State at that time was recruiting the best guys they could find locally because they wanted to fill the stands. That was part of the deal back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next morning I was to meet them for breakfast. And Dad said, he told me the story about the party, and they were so excited. My mother was a guitar player, and she had played for the Allegheny Hilltoppers. Some of you old folks may remember that. Bob Irvin and the Allegheny Hilltoppers.
Yeah.
So she had her, of course, she always had her guitar with her. So she gets her guitar out at the party and starts singing. I guess they sang till like 2 in the morning. So when we have breakfast the next morning, my dad said, hope you didn't want to go anywhere else. Because this is it.
Oh, my.
And I wanted to play at Penn State anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate I did, because after being injured and not being able to play, and all I ever wanted to do was play pro football.
Yeah.
I thought I could. But after so many injuries, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And if I had, I never would have met my lovely wife of 53 years. So that was part of the package.
Yeah. There you go. So obviously playing at Penn State, what was it like playing for them, like the atmosphere, the culture, all that, especially with like Joe Paterno being one of the greats of college football coaches?
Yeah, it was a wonderful time. Joe called it the Great Experiment. And
Really? Huh.
Yes, because he was trying to recruit a higher level player. And obviously we got Lydell and Lydell Mitchell and Franco. And it was an era where black players were starting to come into football. If you think back, and I'm going to tell this story at the library next week, if you think back to the first football player that Notre Dame had that was black, he was a fullback, his name was Lewis. And then they had a guy named, no, I'm sorry, that's Indiana. But anyway, this guy, it was so important to get these black players to feel like they were in the family.
Yeah.
So one story that comes out is Lou Holtz was coaching, at Notre Dame, and they had to make a trip to West Virginia. And when they got there, West Virginia said, well, your black player is going to have to stay in this other hotel.
Yeah.
You can't stay in the white hotel. So he stayed in a rundown shack hotel, and a bunch of the players went over and stayed with him.
Really?
To bring him into the,
That's awesome.
Yep. So there are stories like that out there. And I know Joe had some criticism because we had more black players than most teams.
Yeah.
And we were finding, the coaches I think were finding even then that they were the great players. They were faster, stronger. So going to Penn State was unique for me in that way. Meeting players of other skin color that I had never approached before.
Yeah.
We had a couple guys on the team, Jim Crampton, who was a good ball player and a black American. But very few. Didn't run into that much. Now, 80% of college football teams are black players.
100%.
So that was the part of the Great Experiment was that. Notre Dame jumped into it early and recognized the talent of these guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a great time to be there. Joe he wasn't a lot unlike Coach Schoenwolf. Like Coach Schoenwolf yelled at me all the time, and so did Joe. So he yelled at everybody.
Oh yeah,
that's the way it was.
Oh my. So like, what was it like? Like you obviously like ran out, went on the sidelines and stuff on a Penn. Like, what was it like experience wise? Like just.
Well, the stadium when I went there, the stadium held 56,000, I think. By the time I graduated, it was up to 72, and of course now it's 110.
Yeah.
So I can remember being on the sidelines in those days, and coming from Tyrone, where we got 4,000 or 5,000 that game.
Oh.
And my senior year, I think we had 10,000 for Lock Haven. That was amazing.
Oh.
But to play in front of 50,000 or 70,000, it was amazing. And I can still go on the sideline today if I want to.
Really?
And you stand on there and you see 110,000 crazy people screaming and yelling. It's pretty incredible. When they do a whiteout over there.
Oh, my. Nothing beats a whiteout.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Nothing beats Penn State football, honestly.
Yeah. I don't see anywhere in the country that's like it.
Yeah, 100%. People may try to argue it, but, like, no.
Yeah.
It's Penn State.
They'll not win with us.
No, you're not going to win.
And you're going to Penn State as well to play baseball. So
yeah, I was on the sideline a few times. It's crazy. It's unreal.
Yeah, the big thing I see today differently is speed.
Yeah.
The speed and the size. When you had Mike Reed at 260 and he was an All-American.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Hammond weighed about 230. I weighed 235.
Mm-hmm.
Now your linebackers are 260, 250.
Oh, yeah, on average.
Yeah, the linemen are 320,
Yeah.
315, and they're fast. They
Yeah.
run faster than we did as linebackers.
Yeah, times
So
definitely changed.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what's happened to them.
It is. All the new technology they have and,
Yep.
like, just facilities, just things are, like, allowed to go to and stuff. It's just unreal.
Yeah, our films, I think our game films were in black and white.
Really?
Now they're in color.
Yeah, everybody
great.
has their own little individual iPads. They can
Yep.
probably look over a certain position.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy now.
They stand on the sidelines with iPads.
Mhm. Oh, yeah,
See the
they have all
previous
that
play and
stuff.
they figure out
Yeah,
they can
it's just
pick out a
crazy.
player.
Like the quarterbacks will get like the iPad and then they'll review their last play
Yep.
if they made a pick or something, the mistakes.
We can
Yeah.
even do that in high school.
Yeah.
Franco can do that with
Yeah.
quarterback
Yeah,
or
that's
running back, whoever.
just crazy to
Unreal.
think. It is. It really is. So, tell us a little bit about like just the college atmosphere, like classes, just the people you met, and all that stuff.
Classes were interesting because we would have 300 in a class,
Yeah.
like psychology. You could have 300. I think they still do that.
Mhm.
Biology, any basic courses.
Mhm.
As a freshman or a sophomore, they just cram you into a room, and the professor's way down front. So that was interesting. That
Yeah.
was difficult, I thought. You'll meet people from all over the world. It's
Mhm.
incredible. I still have friends that live in San Francisco or New York, or
Yeah.
we actually have a Letterman's Club, which I was allowed to join, even though I never lettered.
Yeah.
The reason they let me join was I was hurt so much
Mhm.
that I couldn't possibly have played. I only ever really played in one game,
Yeah.
and I got hurt there. So
Yeah.
it was a tough time, and the guys, a group of us formed a Letterman's Club
Yeah.
back in the 80s,
Mhm.
and we now have 1,000 members.
1,000
Just
members.
Unbelievable.
That's
Yep.
unreal.
Yep.
It's awesome.
And we didn't do it during the pandemic, but
Mhm.
we have a guy named Don Abbey
Mhm.
who bought this 17,000 square foot house on Center Hills Country Club. So he has a party there every year for us, which
Really?
is really
Oh.
amazing.
That would be cool.
I think he's worth $800 million or something. I don't know.
Something outrageous enough to buy like a 17,000 square foot
Yeah,
house.
when he first came to campus, he was driving a Lincoln. I'll never
Oh
forget it.
my.
And we just thought he was God, and he was huge. He was 6'4", 260. He was a fullback.
Jeez.
So imagine running into that.
Oh geez, I could only imagine that.
Yeah, one-on-ones with him was tough.
Oh, couldn't imagine that. Must be fun times, huh?
Yep. And Penn State has the biggest alumni association in the world.
I did hear something about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
When you're from Penn State, when you graduate from Penn State, you have an
Mhm.
opportunity. You start applying for jobs.
Yeah.
There's so many alums out there that are in charge of HR or whatever.
Mhm.
If they see your resume, they're interested.
Hmm.
You may not get hired, but you're going to get an
Yeah.
interview. You're going to get
Huh.
that opportunity. So it's
Yeah.
a big deal.
So there you go. Anybody watching, if you're younger, go to Penn State.
Go to Penn State.
Go to Penn
That's
State. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about that picture of your whole team on the sideline there?
Oh yeah, this is. We'll show it later, but
Yeah.
that picture is actually at Haas's in State College on the wall.
Really?
Yep, and
Huh.
My grandkids love to go there and look at it.
That would be neat.
I think they just like to eat, but they like to see it. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a great picture. Again, it was in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was back then. I think in
Yeah.
'70 they started doing color. So you'll see everything in newspapers and all that from back then that
Yeah.
were black and white. So,
Huh.
all those connections are huge. They were great. They helped me a lot over the
Yeah.
years. And I'm just thankful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, probably finish up there. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. It was great having you. Anything else you'd like to add, or?
you have a couple hours?
Oh yeah, we have time.
I have a couple stories about Joe I wanted to tell. And first of all, I want to talk about Sinking Valley Country Club.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of my sophomore year, I had been redshirted that year.
Yeah.
I'm working at Sinking Valley Country Club, and I was thankful for that. And the last day before we went to practice, the next day, I fell on their lawnmower and had 60 stitches on my left foot.
Jeez.
So I show up at practice with a cast on my leg. I thought Joe was going to kill me. So,
Oh my.
I couldn't get a red shirt, so I healed up in weeks, but it was hard to come back.
Yeah.
I had 2 knee surgeries. I broke my foot. Too many things happened.
Yeah.
But Sinking Valley was I had so much fun there at that time. I think the guy that helped me was Gary Detweiler. I think that was the name. I yelled at him. He was working there too. He was a Tyrone. He was a year ahead of me.
Yeah.
And he came over and got me in the car, and they took me to Tyrone Hospital, and that was not a good day. Good day.
I can only imagine.
I wanted to tell a story about Eric Persegin.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Persegin was the coach at Notre Dame from, I think, 64 to 68.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Sickler and Mike Androsky, or Tony Androsky, I can't remember his first name, were best friends, and Tony Androsky was Eric Persegin's roommate at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Well, Tony Androsky was the president of West Vaco at the time, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry and he had talked to me about going to Notre Dame, and I just didn't really want to go there, but I got a letter from Coach Persegin. They have to think about this connection.
Yeah.
I get this letter from Coach Persegin. I have a pile of letters at home, and asking me if I'd be interested in coming to Notre Dame and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1980, I think, my wife and I are in San Francisco, and we're at a dinner with 10 or 12 other Penn State alumni.
Yeah.
And I hear this voice across the room, and Eric Persegin had been doing play-by-play for ABC for a while. So I hear this voice across the room. I look over, it's Eric Persegin. I couldn't believe it. So I wanted to go over and introduce myself, but everybody's pushed me, go see him, go see him.
Yeah.
So I had a Penn State pen in my pocket. So I go over and I introduce myself, and I say, Coach Persegin, you don't remember me. You recruited me in the 65, but I went to Penn State. He said, I'm sorry about that. So I had this pin. I gave it to him. I said, Coach, I want to make you an honorary Penn State alum with this pin. And I said, I forget what all I said, but he got up and gave a 10-minute speech right there about Notre Dame and Penn State history, the great rivalry, and the guys in the white hats and how successful they had become, that sort of thing. So we get back to Penn State, back to State College, and I called the alumni director, who was a friend, and I asked him if he could send Eric Persegin a certificate of alumni, which was a joke.
Yeah.
So he said, well, let me see. I don't know. We'll figure it out. The next day, my secretary buzzes me and says, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? She says, Joe Paterno's on the phone. I thought, no, now what? Because he and I had done some fundraising and that sort of thing. So I pick up the phone. He doesn't even say hello. He says, Tommy, what are you doing? Yeah, we don't do that kind of stuff. So I told
Perfect
the story.
impression.
Well, every guy on the team can do that voice. They heard it so much.
Oh,
he said, I told him the story and what happened. I knew he and Eric were friends.
Mm-hmm.
So sure enough, they send Eric Persegin a certificate of alumnus from Penn State as a joke. So I get a letter from Persegin several weeks later, and he said, thank you for the certificate. I really appreciate it. But I'll never be able to put this on the wall because they'll run me out of time to wear it." So in the
Oh,
letter then he
my.
says, "I'm going to do the play-by-play for the Penn State-Alabama game
Mm-hmm.
next year." I think that was '82 when we won the national championship.
Yeah.
And he told that story on air, how he had become an honorary Penn State alum. So he didn't mention our names, but it was pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, but those are the connections you make with sports.
Yeah.
And that was a great fun.
Oh,
So.
oh, most definitely, yeah. Oh, I was going to say I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. I should also say that there were several of us lived in the State College area. Denny Oncotts, a couple other guys.
Mm-hmm.
Danny Oncott, you may remember, he was an All-American.
Yeah.
Played for the Jets. He had his leg broken 3 places in a kickoff.
Yeah.
He never returned. So,
Yeah.
but he's pretty successful in State College. There were other guys there. And every time Joe would go into a room to speak, like we'd have these fundraisers for cancer or whatever.
Yeah.
After he would speak, he would be up there writing his notes. He never had notes, and his son Jay does the same thing.
Yeah.
We've had Jay at Monogram Club a couple of times, and he never has notes, but he'll sit there before dinner and write notes.
Yeah.
So Joe did the same thing, but he was looking around the room, and when he would see his players, he would come over and say hello.
Really?
Yeah, he was amazing that way.
Joe, yeah, he definitely seems like quite a great guy,
Yeah.
and just awesome that you were able to know him like this. And all
Oh
that.
yeah, the best part of my Penn State experience was getting to know Joe and Sue better
Yeah,
over the years.
definitely.
We were in a restaurant called Mario and Luigi's right along Atherton Street, probably 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had our granddaughter with us that day, and she was 15, I think, 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe and Sue and 2 other ladies were sitting across the room. So I wanted her to meet him.
Yeah.
I waited till they were finished eating. I took her over to meet him, and he was so nice. He took her hand in his hand like this for about 10 minutes
Yeah.
and talked to her about doing the right thing in life. Work as hard as you can. Listen to your grandmother and grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
He was just phenomenal that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the best part of my career.
Yeah.
So.
That'd be awesome. Getting to meet Joe, all that.
Yep.
Quite the college experience you've had. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about? Anything I didn't mention that you want to talk about in college? Or
Not really. College is unique because for the first time in your life, you're really free.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah, I'll
have
get to
be-
experience that in a couple months.
You
Yeah.
will, and you have to be disciplined and
Mm-hmm.
not let other people influence your time. 'Cause
Yeah.
your time is so important.
Yeah, and limited.
Yep.
Got 4 years there.
Yeah.
Gotta get the most out of it. Yeah, well, it was great having you on this podcast. Maybe
Thank you.
get another one going, part 3, if everybody enjoys this one enough. But yeah, it was great having you. Great talking to you about all this stuff. It was awesome.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
thank you very much.
It's been great. Thanks.